On February 14, 1972, Necati Arabaci was born in Turkey. At the time, Turkey was undergoing significant social and economic change. Many families faced limited opportunities, especially in smaller towns and rural regions. Across Europe, however, countries like Germany were experiencing economic expansion and a growing demand for labor. This demand had already triggered waves of migration throughout the 1960s and 1970s, as thousands of Turkish families relocated in search of stability and opportunity. Like many others, the Arabaci family eventually became part of this migration. Germany, particularly West Germany, had established programs to attract foreign workers, known as Gastarbeiter or guest workers. These workers were initially expected to stay temporarily, but many families, including Turkish migrants, settled permanently, raising children and building new lives in unfamiliar cities. Necati Arabaci spent his formative years growing up in Germany, surrounded by two different worlds. Inside the home, Turkish language, traditions, and cultural expectations remained strong. Outside, German society presented a different environment, one defined by structure, discipline, and often social barriers. For many immigrant children, identity became a complex issue. They lived between cultures, belonging fully to neither. Arabaci was no exception. Little is publicly documented about his early childhood in detail, but his upbringing took place during a time when immigrant communities in Germany were often concentrated in specific urban neighborhoods. These areas became tight-knit enclaves, where families supported one another, but also faced economic limitations and social isolation. These environments could be challenging for young people. Opportunities existed, but so did risks. Growing up in urban Germany. By the 1980s, Germany's cities were evolving rapidly. Economic growth brought modernization, but it also widened social gaps in certain districts. Immigrant neighborhoods often lacked the same resources and opportunities available elsewhere. For young men in particular, finding a sense of identity, purpose, and belonging could be difficult. Some pursued education and traditional careers. Others were drawn toward alternative paths. Street culture, small-scale criminal activity, and underground economies existed in many urban areas. These activities ranged from minor offenses to organized operations connected to larger criminal networks. For individuals growing up in these environments, exposure to such influences was not uncommon. Arabaci came of age during this period. Public accounts suggest that as he entered his teenage years, he began associating with individuals connected to criminal circles. At first, this likely involved low-level activities typical of many young men navigating difficult environments. But over time, those connections expanded. Unlike impulsive individuals who were easily noticed by authorities, Arabaci reportedly developed a reputation for being controlled and deliberate. He observed situations carefully, built relationships, and avoided unnecessary attention. These traits would later become significant. Germany's changing landscape. The late 1980s and early 1990s marked one of the most important transitions in modern European history. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Germany was reunified. This moment symbolized freedom and unity, but it also created new challenges. Economic systems shifted rapidly. Cities transformed. Entire industries emerged and disappeared almost overnight. With these changes came new opportunities, both legal and illegal. Urban nightlife expanded dramatically. Nightclubs, bars, and entertainment venues became central to youth culture. These establishments generated significant revenue, attracting investors, entrepreneurs, and organized crime groups alike. Where large amounts of money circulated, criminal organizations often followed. Nightclubs required security. Security created influence, and influence created opportunity. This environment would become one of the entry points for many individuals seeking power within underground networks. Arabaci was among those who gravitated toward this world. Entry into nightlife and security. By the early 1990s, Necati Arabaci had reportedly begun working in nightclub security roles. Security positions were more than just physical jobs. They placed individuals at the intersection of business, nightlife, and criminal networks. Security personnel controlled access. They determined who entered and who didn't. They managed conflicts. They enforced authority. In many cases, security teams operated independently or were connected to larger organizations that provided protection services. These services could be legitimate, but sometimes they existed within gray areas. Security contracts could involve influence over business operations. Control over security often meant indirect control over venues themselves. For individuals seeking advancement in underground circles, this environment offered visibility and connections. Arabaci reportedly became increasingly involved in these operations. He built relationships. He expanded his network. He learned how the system worked. Organized crime presence in Germany. During this same period, Germany became a major hub for organized crime activity. Multiple international groups operated within the country, including motorcycle clubs, drug trafficking networks, and various ethnic-based criminal organizations. Among the most well-known of these groups was the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Founded in the United States in 1948, the Hells Angels had expanded internationally over the following decades. By the 1990s, chapters existed throughout Europe, including Germany. The organization maintained a strong presence in nightlife security, transportation, and other industries. Membership in such organizations required loyalty, discipline, and trust. Arabaci would eventually become associated with this environment. His work in nightclub security placed him in direct proximity to individuals connected to organized groups. Through these connections, he gained exposure to larger criminal structures. Building a reputation. Reputation played a critical role in organized crime. Influence was built over time through actions and reliability. Public information suggests that Arabaci developed a reputation for professionalism and effectiveness within security operations. He was reportedly viewed as dependable. This reliability allowed him to advance further into the network of individuals operating in Germany's nightlife and underground economy. These networks were structured. They relied on hierarchy. Positions were earned, not given. By the early 1990s, Arabaci was no longer just an observer. He was becoming a participant. The environment that shaped him. Understanding Necati Arabaci's early development requires understanding the environment in which he lived. Germany offered opportunity, but access to that opportunity varied. For immigrants and their children, success often required navigating additional barriers. Some individuals found traditional paths. Others found alternative systems. These alternative systems operated parallel to mainstream society. They offered income. They offered status. But they also carried risk. Arabaci's trajectory reflected these realities. His involvement in nightlife security introduced him to networks that would shape the rest of his life. A foundation for what would come next. By the early 1990s, Necati Arabaci had established himself within Germany's nightlife security world. He had connections. He had experience. He had visibility. These elements created a foundation that would lead to deeper involvement in organized crime. At this stage, however, his story was still developing. He was not yet widely known, not yet a major figure, but the conditions that would enable his rise were already in place. Germany's nightlife continued expanding. Organized crime networks continued growing, and Necati Arabaci was positioned within that world. The next phase of his life would see those connections evolve into something far more significant.